breaking down America's most dangerous crimes right now. Subscribe, like, and comment if you're ready for the kind of story that doesn't just haunt your screen, it follows you into the dark. The body was discovered at 4:17 a.m., face down in the snow behind a closed gas station off Route 19, just outside Pittsburgh. The temperature was below freezing, the sky the color of bruised steel, and the only sound in the empty parking lot was the hum of a broken streetlight flickering above her. She had no shoes, no purse, no phone, no ID, just a thin silver necklace and a faint bruise along her jawline. Officer Ryan Beck was the first on scene. He stood there longer than protocol allowed, staring at her frozen hair stuck to her cheek, trying to make sense of the fact that someone had left a woman to die in the cold like discarded trash. He'd worked homicides before, but something about this one felt deliberate, personal, controlled. When Detective Alina Monroe arrived 20 minutes later, she took one look at the body and felt the same chill, and it wasn't from the weather. "This wasn't random," she said quietly. Beck glanced at her. "Why?" "She was placed," Monroe replied. "Not dumped. Positioned." The woman's arms were folded across her chest. Her legs were straight. Whoever had left her here wanted her found. But not immediately. Just late enough that she'd already be gone. The medical examiner confirmed what Monroe already suspected. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the back of the head. No drugs. No alcohol. No signs of sexual assault. No obvious robbery, because there was nothing left to steal. Which meant the motive wasn't money. And probably wasn't impulse. Within hours, the victim was identified. Her name was Leah Parker, 29. A public health data analyst from Cleveland. No criminal history. No enemies. No risky lifestyle. No reason, on paper, to be dead behind a gas station 3 hours from home. Monroe stood over the evidence board that afternoon, staring at Leah's photo. Brown eyes. Soft smile. The kind of face that blended into crowds. The kind of woman people walked past every day without remembering, until she was gone. What was she doing here? Monroe asked aloud. Her partner, Detective Marcus Shaw, leaned back in his chair. That's the problem. No one knows. Leah's phone records showed her last outgoing call at 10:42 p.m., to a number registered to a burner phone. Her credit card had been used at a gas station in Youngstown at 11:18 p.m., then nowhere else. No toll records. No rideshare history. No hotel bookings. She'd vanished into the gap between places. Monroe interviewed Leah's sister the same day. Tara Parker sat rigid in the chair, hands clenched in her lap. She wouldn't meet strangers at night, Tara said. She was careful. She didn't even walk her dog after dark without calling me. Was she dating anyone? Monroe asked. Tara hesitated. She said she'd met someone. But she didn't want to talk about him. Said it was complicated. Did she give you a name? No. Did she seem scared? Tara shook her head slowly. Not scared. Nervous. Like she didn't trust her own instincts. Monroe felt something tighten in her chest. That night, forensics finished processing Leah's clothes. There were traces of dirt from 2 locations, one rural, one urban. And faint fibers from what appeared to be the interior of a vehicle. Not a ride share. Not public transit. Something private. Then came the autopsy addendum. There were defensive wounds on Leah's forearms. She had fought. Which meant she had known her attacker, at least long enough to feel betrayed by them. The next break came from traffic cameras. Leah's credit card timestamp at the Youngstown gas station was clear enough to pull footage. The video showed her stepping out of a dark SUV, laughing at something the driver said. She leaned back into the window for a moment, smiling, relaxed, then went inside. The driver never got out. The SUV's plates were obscured by mud. But Monroe froze the footage on the driver's side profile. Male. Early 40s. Baseball cap. Clean jacket. No visible tattoos. No obvious threat. He looked normal. And that terrified her. Zoom in, she said. The image sharpened just enough to catch his jawline. His nose. His mouth. Run facial recognition, Monroe ordered. On what? Shaw asked. Half a face. Run it anyway. While the system processed, Monroe studied Leah's digital footprint. Emails. Messages. Work files. Nothing suspicious. No threats. No stalking. No financial stress. No sudden changes in behavior. Except one thing. 3 weeks earlier, Leah had accessed restricted datasets at her workplace, records involving opioid distribution patterns across multiple states. The access wasn't illegal, but it was unusual. The data included flagged discrepancies in shipment volumes, deliveries that didn't match prescriptions. Monroe felt the gears start turning. Could this be related? Shaw asked. Maybe, Monroe said. Or maybe it's coincidence. But people don't usually die over coincidence. They contacted Leah's employer. The supervisor confirmed Leah had raised concerns about anomalies in regional pharmaceutical distribution. But the issue had been escalated internally and quietly reassigned. Reassigned to who? Monroe asked. I'm not sure, the supervisor replied. Compliance team. External consultants. What firm? I'd have to check. Monroe didn't like that answer. The facial recognition search came back with 3 partial matches. 2 were dismissed immediately. The third made Shaw sit up. Name: Daniel Klein. Age: 44. Former logistics analyst turned pharmaceutical compliance consultant. No criminal history. No open warrants. Resided in West Virginia. And his firm? One that specialized in regulatory audits for large-scale pharmaceutical distributors. Leah's employer had contracted them 6 months earlier. That's our guy, Shaw said. Not yet, Monroe replied. That's our coincidence. They pulled Klein's phone records. His burner phone wasn't registered to him, but cell tower data placed one of his devices in Cleveland the night Leah disappeared. Then Youngstown. Then Pittsburgh. The same route Leah would have taken. Monroe felt the pressure build. Get me a warrant, she said. Now. But before it came through, something else happened. A second body was found. This time in Missouri. The victim was male. Mid-30s. Discovered in a parking garage stairwell in St. Louis. Cause of death: blunt force trauma. No wallet. No phone. No ID. Arms folded across his chest. The staging was identical. When Monroe saw the report, her stomach dropped. Not coincidence, she said. Pattern. The victim was identified as Evan Holt. 34. Data scientist. Recently contracted as a private consultant for a pharmaceutical compliance review firm. Same industry. Same timeline. Same death. And the same unexplained calm expression frozen on his face. Monroe called Missouri's lead investigator. We think we're chasing the same person, she said. 2 victims connected to pharma data audits. Both staged. There was a pause on the other end. You're telling me this isn't random? I'm telling you someone is targeting analysts. Why? That's what we're trying to find out. The warrant for Daniel Klein was approved an hour later. They moved fast. His home sat on a quiet cul-de-sac outside Morgantown. Neighbors described him as polite, reserved, professional. The kind of guy who waved but never lingered. When police breached the door, the house was empty. But the basement wasn't. Inside, they found 3 burner phones, all powered off. A laptop wiped clean. A whiteboard covered in timelines and initials. And in the center of the room, a corkboard filled with printed spreadsheets, charts, and flow diagrams, all tied to pharmaceutical shipment data. Names were circled. Numbers highlighted. Shipping routes mapped. And at the top of the board, written in thick black marker, was one phrase. Leverage through silence. Monroe stared at it. He wasn't killing randomly, she whispered. He was targeting people who knew too much. But that wasn't the worst part. In the corner of the basement, they found a locked steel cabinet. Inside were 5 folders, each labeled with a name. Leah Parker. Evan Holt. 3 others. All analysts. All consultants. All tied to pharmaceutical oversight. Only 2 were confirmed dead. Which meant 3 weren't. Yet. Monroe's phone buzzed before she could speak. It was Shaw. "Alina," he said. "We've got a problem." "What kind?" The Missouri victim's phone just pinged. "That's impossible," Monroe said. "It was never recovered." "That's what I thought. But the IMEI just registered on a tower outside Cincinnati." Monroe felt her pulse spike. "So someone turned it on?" "Yeah," Shaw replied. 10 minutes ago." Monroe looked back at the folders. At the names. At the words on the board. Leverage through silence. "Run it," she said. "Trace it." There was a pause. Then Shaw's voice dropped. "It's moving." "Moving how?" "South. Fast. Like it's in a vehicle." Monroe felt the room tilt. "That phone belongs to a dead man." "Yeah," Shaw said. "Which means whoever killed him just picked it up." Monroe stared at Leah's name on the folder. Then at the 3 others. Then at the empty house. "This isn't over," she said. And when they opened the final sealed envelope hidden behind the cabinet, what they found inside changed everything. If you thought Chapter 1 was intense, buckle up. Like, comment, and subscribe. Because this is where the darkness really digs in. The envelope in Detective Alina Monroe's hands was small, nondescript, but the weight of it felt like a lead brick. She carefully opened it, revealing a series of high-resolution photographs, printed emails, and a single thumb drive. At first glance, it looked like ordinary corporate correspondence, invoices, contracts, internal memos. But the more she scanned, the more her stomach knotted. The photos were what stopped her cold. In one, Leah Parker sat in her living room, smiling at a man partially obscured in shadow. He wore a baseball cap and a leather jacket. In another, Evan Holt posed for a coffee shop photo with the same man. And in a third, a blurry image showed an unidentified woman watching from the background, her expression sharp, almost predatory. "Every victim was photographed," Monroe muttered. "Before they were killed." Shaw leaned over her shoulder, eyes widening. "So, he's studying them? Watching them?" "Not just watching," Monroe said. "He's planning every move. Mapping out fear, anticipation, opportunity. This isn't impulsive. It's precise." The emails on the thumb drive confirmed her suspicion. Sent under encrypted addresses, they referenced operational code names: Analyst 1, Analyst 2, Silence Protocol, and Extraction Window. One message read, "Confirm engagement. Ensure no digital trace. Target knows too much. Removal required." Monroe rubbed her temples. "Removal, that's a euphemism for murder." Shaw nodded slowly. "And he's been doing this for months. Or years. How many more are on the list?" The answer came when Monroe opened a spreadsheet embedded in one of the files. 20 names. 20 analysts and consultants, all connected to pharmaceutical compliance, distribution audits, and sensitive shipment tracking. 6 were dead. 4 were currently unaccounted for, and the rest had been warned off in indirect ways: sudden job terminations, anonymous threats, and mysterious financial audits. This wasn't just a serial killer. This was someone using the corporate system as camouflage. Someone who could move silently through legitimate channels and leave devastation behind. Monroe and Shaw mobilized quickly. Every federal agency they could think of was contacted: FBI Cybercrime Division, DEA oversight units, and even Homeland Security, given the interstate and potentially national implications. Every law enforcement contact gave the same reaction: caution, disbelief, and a deep unease. They were chasing a ghost who blended perfectly into the system he was destroying. Meanwhile, the unaccounted-for analysts were disappearing faster than anyone could track. The first was a woman named Simone Graves, 31, located in Detroit. Security footage from her apartment building captured a man leaving her unit late at night, carrying a black duffel bag. Residents reported a white SUV with tinted windows idling near the curb. By the time police arrived, she was gone. No note, no struggle, no clue. Just absence. Monroe stared at her map of the Midwest. The pattern was terrifying. Each disappearance followed a predictable route. First, the analyst was isolated from colleagues, then followed, and finally vanished within 24 hours. It was as if the killer had a blueprint: strike fast, erase evidence, and leave no one to question him. Tracking the SUV was a challenge. License plates were swapped multiple times along the route. GPS jammers disrupted signals. The man was meticulous, surgical. Whoever he wasn't careless. He was methodical, almost like a chess grandmaster orchestrating moves years in advance. The investigators dug deeper into the financial trail. Every victim had interacted with shell companies tied to shadowy investors, off-the-book deals, and offshore accounts. One name kept surfacing in the background: Ethan Crow, the same individual Monroe had suspected in Chapter 1. Crow was elusive. His history in military intelligence provided him access to tactical knowledge, surveillance techniques, and operational discretion. He had left no digital footprint connecting him to the murders, except for patterns Monroe and Shaw began to uncover. Each disappearance, each death, aligned perfectly with shipments, audits, and financial anomalies Crow had been contracted to investigate. Then came the twist. One morning, Monroe received a tip from an anonymous source. A USB drive had been left outside a Detroit cafe, with a single note: "If you want to stop him, you'll have to understand why." She plugged it into her secure workstation. Video files began to play, each showing one of the victims at a corporate training seminar, talking candidly about discrepancies they'd discovered. Then, without warning, a shadowed figure, unmistakably Crow, entered the frame in several clips, silently observing, taking notes. The realization hit Monroe. Crow wasn't killing for greed. He was eliminating threats, yes, but also sending a message. Each murder was calculated to intimidate, control, and silence a network of professionals who might expose illegal activities buried within legitimate corporations. The psychological profile became clearer. Crow wasn't just a killer. He was a strategist, blending lethal force with manipulation and fear. His victims were never chosen at random. They were analysts, consultants, and investigators, people who saw too much. Meanwhile, Simone Graves remained missing. Tracking her phone revealed sporadic pings across multiple states: Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky. It was as if she was being moved deliberately, kept off balance, isolated, and fearful. Monroe feared she was being groomed for her role in the pattern, either as a target to be eliminated or, worse, coerced into compliance. The investigation faced yet another complication. Crow began to anticipate the detectives' moves. Surveillance footage they set up to monitor shell companies caught a glimpse of a white SUV leaving a lot mere minutes before Monroe and Shaw arrived. Security cameras were tampered with remotely. Evidence at a storage facility in Cleveland vanished overnight. Files, logs, digital backups, cleaned with a precision that suggested inside knowledge. Monroe realized they were not just chasing a killer, they were being stalked by him. Crow wasn't just eliminating his targets, he was studying the investigators themselves, learning their methods, predicting their next moves. Then came the phone call that changed everything. The voice was distorted, untraceable. "Detective Monroe. You're very close. Too close. Stop following the path, or your next file will be blank." Monroe's hands shook. She slammed the receiver down. Shaw looked at her. "Do we call it off?" "No," she said, voice firm. "We escalate." They reached out to Leah Parker's last known contact, a financial consultant named Jordan Miles. He had worked closely with both Leah and Evan Holt on shipment audits. When questioned, he revealed a detail that sent chills down their spines. Crow had approached him weeks prior, offering a consulting role on audits, under the guise of risk mitigation. The offer was lucrative, the terms strict. Miles had refused. And then the threats began. Anonymous calls. Messages implying surveillance. Photos showing him leaving his apartment. Crow's reach wasn't confined to a single state. He had contacts, influence, and mobility. Monroe realized the scope. This wasn't a domestic crime spree. This was a multi-state operation targeting professionals who might expose illegal activities under the veneer of corporate legitimacy. As night fell over Detroit, Monroe stared at the screen showing the pinging location of Simone Graves. She had stopped moving. The GPS trace froze near a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Monroe knew they were running against the clock. They arrived at the warehouse, units surrounding the perimeter. The doors were locked, lights off, no signs of life, except for faint movement in the upper windows. They breached entry. Empty halls. Echoes of water dripping. And then, the basement door, locked, heavy, reinforced. Monroe's heart pounded. Shaw prepared to open it. The metal groaned under the force of their tools. And when the lock finally gave way, the room was empty. Except for one thing. A single laptop sat on a desk in the center of the basement. Powered on. Open. The screen displayed a live feed, multiple cameras, all pointed at different analysts across the country. Some at home, some at work, all unaware they were being watched. And in the corner, a chat box blinked, "You are next." Monroe stepped back, realizing the true scale. Crow wasn't just targeting victims. He had created a surveillance network, a web of control, a digital panopticon. Anyone who got too close, anyone who asked questions, could be erased, observed, or coerced. Shaw swallowed hard. His everywhere. Monroe nodded. And now, he knows we're onto him. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. Crow wasn't just a killer or a manipulator. He was a predator operating in plain sight, exploiting systems, hiding in shadows that law enforcement couldn't penetrate, yet. And then the laptop flickered. A message appeared on the screen, in bold, white letters, "You found the door. Step inside, or your file will be next." Monroe felt her pulse spike. The hunt had just escalated. And one truth was crystal clear: the most dangerous crime wasn't just murder. It was the orchestration of fear, control, and invisibility, and they were deep inside it now, with nowhere to hide. The screen went black. And at that moment, a single phone buzzed in the corner of the basement. Simone Graves' device. Active. Moving. Fast. Monroe grabbed her coat. Shaw followed. Outside, the wind howled through the Detroit streets. Somewhere in the darkness, Crow was moving again. Watching. Planning. Waiting. And the next move, Monroe knew, would change everything. Before we dive into the final act, smash that subscribe button, like, and comment, because the truth you're about to see is darker than anything you've imagined. The city was quiet, deceptively so. Monroe and Shaw moved through the Detroit streets with a sense of urgency that matched the storm raging inside their heads. The GPS ping from Simone Graves' phone had gone cold for a few minutes, then reactivated near the Ohio border. It was moving fast, north, east, then south again, zigzagging through highways as if the driver knew they were being tracked. Monroe leaned back in the passenger seat of the unmarked car, scanning a laptop with live traffic data and surveillance feeds. "He's baiting us," she muttered. "He's controlling the pace, the location, even our perception of it." Shaw's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "We follow it and risk walking into a trap. We ignore it and we lose her." The tension in the car was suffocating. This wasn't a simple pursuit. Crow had anticipated law enforcement responses at every turn, every checkpoint, every surveillance camera, every GPS tracker. It was as if he had rehearsed this exact scenario in his mind months ago. As they approached a small industrial district in Columbus, Ohio, the device pinged again, "Final stop." The coordinates led them to a warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside. Rusted metal siding, broken windows, and a heavy layer of grime that suggested no one had been inside for years. Yet the GPS trace confirmed one thing. Simone was here, somewhere inside. Monroe and Shaw approached cautiously. SWAT had been alerted but couldn't arrive in time without tipping Crow off. The air smelled like damp metal and oil. Footsteps echoed against the concrete, though they couldn't tell if they were their own or someone else's. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of shadows. Broken crates lined the walls, and chains hung from the ceiling like silent sentinels. Monroe noticed footprints in the dust, small, deliberate, leading toward a heavy steel door at the far end. She gestured for Shaw to follow and carefully pried the door open. The hinges groaned. Inside, the room was empty except for a chair in the center. Strapped to it was Simone Graves. Her eyes were wide, but she was alive. Shaking. Bruised. Silent. Monroe rushed forward. Simone. The moment their hands touched hers, the lights flickered on. Overhead, a camera recorded everything. Crow had anticipated a rescue attempt. He was watching. Smiling somewhere hidden, using the network of cameras he had set up months ago. A voice echoed through the room. Cold. Controlled. Calm. Detective Monroe. I've been expecting you. Monroe's stomach tightened. The voice came from a speaker system hidden in the ceiling. You've been very diligent. But diligence can be dangerous. You've seen too much. Shaw's hand went to his gun, but Monroe stopped him. We do this smart, or she dies. Don't engage blindly. The room's lights stabilized. On the walls, photographs of Leah Parker, Evan Holt, and the other victims stared back. Crow had orchestrated a gallery of control, cataloging every person he had eliminated or threatened. The terror in Simone's eyes sharpened Monroe's focus. They had to act, but Crow's intelligence made this a nightmare scenario. He had planned every exit, every blind spot. Any rash move could end Simone's life instantly. Then Monroe noticed something critical, a small, unguarded panel near the ventilation shaft. It led to a maintenance tunnel. The camera angles didn't cover it. It was narrow, tight, but it offered a way out. Monroe whispered her plan to Shaw. I'll get her through the tunnel. You cover the entrance. Once we're out, we alert SWAT. Timing is everything. They moved. Slowly. Carefully. Monroe unfastened Simone's restraints while Shaw kept his eyes on the doorway, listening for any sign of Crow's interference. Time seemed to stretch. Every creak of metal, every whisper of wind felt like an alarm. When they were almost through the tunnel, a metallic click echoed behind them. Monroe froze. Shaw reached for the door, but it slammed open, and there he was. Ethan Crow. Calm. Controlled. Smiling. You shouldn't have come alone, he said. Monroe's heart pounded. He had no visible weapon, but that didn't matter. Crow's power was in control, fear, and preparation. His reputation had proven that bullets or brute force weren't necessary. Release her, Crow, Monroe said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. Crow stepped forward. Detective, you admire structure. Order. Control. I am simply maintaining balance in a world that doesn't care for it. Monroe realized then, this wasn't just revenge. It wasn't personal. Crow believed he was right, a predator convinced of righteousness, eliminating what he perceived as corruption, chaos, or incompetence. The tension broke with a sudden noise, a misstep by Crow. In that split second, Shaw lunged, tackling him to the ground. Crow struggled, surprisingly strong and trained, but the element of surprise gave them the upper hand. Monroe freed Simone completely and guided her toward the tunnel exit. As they moved, SWAT arrived, surrounding the warehouse and securing the perimeter. Crow was restrained, calm now, almost smug. The aftermath was chaotic. Journalists swarmed. Families of victims were notified. Investigators pored over Crow's digital empire, uncovering a terrifying web of surveillance, threats, and manipulation spanning multiple states. But the most shocking revelation came from his personal notes, encrypted diaries, financial records, and communication logs. He hadn't acted alone entirely. He had collaborators, advisors, and insiders within several corporations who provided intelligence, covering his tracks and ensuring his operations went unnoticed. Monroe and Shaw stared at the documents in disbelief. The scale was unprecedented. Crow hadn't just murdered individuals. He had created a network of intimidation, a blueprint for modern, invisible crime. Simone Graves, traumatized but alive, revealed that Crow had been grooming other analysts for compliance manipulation, blackmail, and forced secrecy. His philosophy was chilling. Fear and control were more powerful than bullets. The media dubbed him the analyst hunter. The victims' families struggled with grief, but relief washed over them knowing the immediate threat was neutralized. Still, Monroe knew the investigation wasn't over. Crow's reach had been vast, and uncovering every accomplice and shadowed operation could take years. In the final interrogation, Crow remained eerily calm. "You've caught me," he said, "but the system remains. Others will continue what I started." Monroe pressed, "Why them? Why target professionals?" Crow smiled faintly. "Because they saw too much. Knowledge is dangerous. Ignorance is bliss." As he was led away in handcuffs, Monroe looked at the photographs of Leah, Evan, and the others. Justice had been served, but the scars remained. 3 months later, another analyst vanished, in Europe this time. The method was similar: staged environment, missing personal items, and calculated timing. Crow was behind bars, yet the patterns he established seemed to ripple outward, inspiring a copycat or a continuation of his vision. Monroe sighed, staring at the map filled with red pins marking the victims, near misses, and disappearances. She knew the fight against this kind of crime wasn't over. It never would be. And as she closed the file, a note fell out, typed, not handwritten: "You stopped one, but the network continues. Watch the shadows." Monroe realized then the most dangerous crimes weren't always physical, not always immediately violent. They were invisible, strategic, and adaptive. They lurked in the systems we trust, in the structures we rely on, and in the people we least suspect. And for the audience following this story, one truth remained: the world of invisible, calculated crime was just beginning to reveal itself, and if you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.